Hello. So today's midlife conversation, I guarantee, is going to be one that you will never, ever have heard before because today I'm joined by Amanda Charles. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Andrea.
And your title is absolutely fascinating because you are a psychologist by training, by trade. It is something that you have made your life's work. But over the past few years, you've made I suppose we could call it a cosmic shift. It's a psychic shift in terms of how you best work for your clients, and it is all culminated together in this incredible book which I went away on holiday recently, and it was the only book I took with me, and I devoured it. It's called The Psychic Psychologist: Heal Your Past, Find Peace in Your Present, and Transform Your Future. And I really want to dig in today into what all this means, and how slightly shifting our mindset and the way we think about things can help us heal and move forward into a brighter future. So I'll start off with obviously you trained as a psychologist, which people don't appreciate is a science. It's a
Yes.
science backed study of the mind and our behavior. How did you then come to merge the psychic side of you and bring those together in a way that works for you and your clients? Because I'm guessing there must have been a lot of resistance internally, externally, because the two just do not seem to go together at all. And yet, when we delve deeper into this, you'll find that they do.
Absolutely. You've got it spot on, Andrea. It's so funny. I literally disowned that part of myself for so many years. In fact, I had many experiences from a very young age, and I just couldn't allow myself to accept that. And then obviously I went into a science field, as you've just said, and even more so disconnected. I would always try to find a scientific explanation for everything. There had to be some other kind of a reason behind what was going on. And it was only when I actually started looking into the science behind, quantum science, the science behind the fact that we are all energetic beings, that I started to kind of embrace the fact that actually perhaps there's more to this. And then I delved a bit further and I looked into epigenetics and kind of got the realization that I've got my own healing stories, but then I started to get the science behind it to allow me to kind of acknowledge that. But it was a very, very long journey.
And I can understand why, because there's an embarrassment, I suppose, particularly when you're working in a science-backed field, to even entertain the idea that there could be something to this energetic side to us, where we are receiving energies that we can't necessarily explain. But just because it hasn't been explained through science doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. And there are countless stories and tales throughout the millennia of these kind of instances happening, that in some cultures they are readily accepted and understood, but for some reason in ours, unless you can back it up with data and science, we are not going to believe that this could possibly happen. So talk me through how you decided to, you mentioned there, did you call it quantum physics or quantum science? How you decided to look into making this whole idea of being psychic a science-backed phenomenon?
Yeah, well, actually, it goes all the way back to when I was 21. So I was diagnosed with a pituitary tumor, and I was on this medication it was pretty horrible, to be honest. And so I came off the medication, and I wanted to try to work on it in another way. So I was given kind of a set space of time. What I had was a hyperprolactinoma. And at the time I was in my science era. So I was working at Reuters. I worked in occupational psychology, so leadership development, change management. And one day, one of the people that worked there, she came in and she said, "Oh, my husband feels like he really wants to help you." And I thought that was a bit odd. She was organising some meetings. She was a temporary staff, and I was like, okay. And basically, long story short, they'd gone and done a course in Reiki healing. and they decided that they wanted to help me. So I went along to their flat after work, and they did this thing called Reiki, and I'd never heard of it and didn't know anything about it. So I kind of lay there. They did this thing, and nothing happened. And I thought, oh, strange, but nothing was going on. And they said, oh, we need to see you tomorrow. So I was like, oh, okay. So I went along. I felt they'd been kind enough to give me their time. And so I went along to this session with them the following day. And on this occasion, all these strange things started happening. I was getting these like pulsating energy balls. I was connecting in with memories from when I was a child, actually, when I was afraid of some of this kind of psychic phenomena that would happen. And long story short, I went off and learnt that myself. I started reading Deepak Chopra's Quantum Healing, doing visualizations. I was doing meditations, and I managed to heal the tumor. The endocrinologist wrote "spontaneous recovery?" over the notes, and he couldn't understand how I'd managed to do it. I'd gone from 15,000 to less than 10. And rather than him, obviously science-based as well, being able to kind of think objectively, with a critical eye about what I'd been doing, it had to be some kind of a spontaneous recovery. So the quantum science goes all the way back to that point in time, but I didn't really fully understand what I was doing. So quantum science actually tells us that it looks at us as a subatomic level. So at a subatomic level, we're actually made up of energy. And so therefore, we have an influence over that energy. Your energy, I'm energy, even these computers are energy, but they're just structured in a different way so that we are vibrating at a different frequency, shall we say. So when you are kind of sad, depressed, low, you're vibrating at a lower energetic frequency, and so that can influence you. As your body, your emotions, your mind is all connected, and we've got scientific proof for that as well. The lovely Dr. Candice Pert, she came out with a book called Molecules of Emotion, and it's talking about, she was looking for the opiate receptor in the brain, and then realized that we have these receptors throughout the whole body. And then we started to become aware with psychoneuroimmunology how our thoughts and feelings impact the body. And so I started gathering more and more of this evidence that allowed me to think, wait a minute, this isn't just woo-woo. There is evidence behind this, and people need to know, because we'll go to a medical doctor and they'll look at us physically. They might look at one element of our physicality and exclude the fact that actually our emotions are impacting us physically, and so are our thoughts. And so, we have to look at ourselves on all of these different dimensions of the self. And that's where I come in with the psychic psychologist, because as a psychologist, I might look at your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors. I might look at how, you've become the person you are today. But I would never have been trained in healing. I would never know about the energetic body. And so by bringing them together, I'm hoping that, more psychologists can become aware that we need to look at all of these levels. And I've developed something called the hierarchy of healing. So I don't know whether you've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where, you've got to meet each need before you can move to the next. So your first need is like safety and warmth and food. Without that, you can't go on to, self-actualize and have an amazing life. And it's the same kind of thing with the hierarchy of healing. We've got to look to the physical first. We're physical beings, and we need to look at our physical body. We need to look then at the emotions that live within that physical body, and then looking to the mind that's influenced by those emotions. We used to think it was the other way around, that our thoughts influenced our feelings. It is a bit of a feedback loop, but there's a lot of evidence now that shows much more information comes from the body and goes up into the brain, into the mind. And then we expand out into the energy body and connecting with what's happening on an energetic level, the spiritual level. And then we look to relationships, and that's our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with others, because we can only be as connected to another person to the degree that we're connected to ourselves. So that's how I kind of bring it all together.
So if someone is watching this and thinking, right, I want to try and find a way to do what you did and tune into myself at a level so that, yes, I'll carry on taking, science-backed medication for whatever it is, whether it's, in my experience, long COVID and autoimmune issues and this kind of thing, or a bad back, whatever it is, how can we personally and individually find a way to tune in to that part of us that really every single one of us has, but it lies dormant because we don't know how to access it, we don't know how to use it. And I'm not saying put aside conventional medicine, not at all, but
No.
find a way to use the two, so that, as Louise Hay, famously said, the body, the you can heal yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you said there is key. It's not about choosing spirituality or alternative or complementary therapies over science, over the physical. It's about bringing them all together. So you would, for example, take what you need on a physical level, whether that's medication or whatever that might be, if you choose to do so. You wouldn't exclude that, but you'd be looking in and you'd be tuning in at, in the present moment. So in order to be able to help and heal yourself, you have to be in the present moment. And because of the way we live our lives in this modern society, it's so fast, it's so quick, we haven't got time. And often we're we have a highly activated stress response system. A lot of us carry trauma, a lot of us, we live these busy lives. So the first point for people is to come back to the self in the present moment. And by incorporating techniques that help to kind of turn down that stress response system. So learning to regulate our emotions. So we've looked at the physical side of things, and also on that level, it's about how you behave in the world as well. So you need to be identifying as the person you want to be and behaving and taking action as that person, first of all. And then you're looking and connecting in with what's going on an emotional level and learning to regulate that side of the self. So that's bringing in tools like breath works. That there's a lot of science behind that. A cold therapy seems to be a thing. I can't put on Instagram these days so that people jumping into an ice bath. I know I wouldn't want to do that. Within the book, there's a load of techniques that show you how to regulate your emotions. And the reason for that it is a number of levels. I just spoke about the fact that if you're at these low level frequencies, you can't increase and raise your frequency to the higher level where you can facilitate change. So we need to help lift your vibrational frequency from that heavy place where you're kind of stuck and suffering. That there is impacted by what's come before. So in order to do that, I talk about a timeline. So, we'd be getting people to go back into what's occurred in your life, having an awareness of that from before, during, and after your birth. And again, all evidence behind that, we would just assume, one of the chapters is a life before life, and I was very anxious about writing it. But there's a whole host of research about past lives and the impact they have in the present. So, we bring in past lives, we bring in ancestral trauma and how that can be passed down through the generations. Cellular memory, there's lots of research about that. And even bringing in intrauterine trauma and the impact that can have, not just on you as the child being born, but also, in the family environment around you. If your mother has had, difficulties during the pregnancy, then it will impact her ability to connect and to attach with you when you're born and growing up. So that's kind of where we start. We're already regulated in the present, so we have that awareness of the past. We down-regulate your emotional system in the present, and then we look to strategies to process those experiences that you're carrying. So we look again at that on all the different levels of the self. So by bringing in tools, looking at your energetics. So there's something called emotional freedom technique. You may have seen people tapping. That's working on the meridian lines, the energy lines within the body, to free yourself from the emotional attachment. So bringing in tools such as that, but looking at the brain as well, looking at the thoughts, restructuring your cognitions around your situation. So if you're unwell, then you'd be looking at, what you then believe about yourself, what you believe about your illness, what you're identifying as. If you are identifying as that ill person, then you're going to be that ill person. I never identified as somebody with a brain tumor or anything that's occurred since then. I always chose to see it as something that I was going to learn from. And I talk about something called inner tuition. So we've got intuition, but we've got inner tuition, which is where the body, the emotions, the thoughts, they're speaking to us. And it's the wisdom from our experiences that we can then grow from. So in order to answer your question, it's looking at all of those levels and your
Mm.
relationship with yourself and with other people, because it's reflected back, it's mirrored back to you through your relationships too.
Oh my gosh, I could literally unpick every bit of that and go off in a million tangents, because so much of what you said is so interesting. There's a bit in the book where you talk about, is it interuterine? I want to use the right word, when
Intrauterine,
you're,
yeah.
yeah, when you're any trauma that you might experience as a mother passes through to the unborn child. And in terms of that, and you mentioned a moment in your own pregnancy where you experienced something that was traumatic for you, and you felt so terrible about it afterwards when you realized that, oh my gosh, that experience that I had actually transferred into my child. And if you think about it, that you might think, well, a load of rubbish. Of course not. The baby's not born yet. But, you think we're told about certain foods and drink and what have you that we should or shouldn't eat when we're pregnant.
Yeah.
It absolutely stands to reason that our stress hormones, the cortisol that surges through our body, of course it's going to find its way into something that is growing inside of you. That's logical.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But I think it's so useful to understand that, so that maybe if your child is colicky or seems unsettled for whatever reason, rather than just thinking, they're a grumpy child, there could actually be a reason for it. Once you
Yeah.
know that, you have tools in your kit that then you can move forward and find ways to soothe and reassure and work around that. And to me, that is completely logical. I want to pick up though on what you mentioned there about identifying, because
Mm.
very often if someone is given a diagnosis of a particular health concern, and it could be something that is extremely challenging, it could be something like you say, whether you had a tumor on your pituitary gland. I hope you don't mind me sharing, you recently at the end of last year suffered a stroke and were extremely poorly. And I'm really happy to see that you are so much better now, and you seem much like your old self, as it were. But this whole idea of getting on any kind of prognosis, diagnosis, and identifying as that thing can play such a huge impact on your recovery from that. Now, I'll give
Yeah.
you an example. A very good friend of mine was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer. And understandably, he'd smoked his whole life. So it was no surprise to him or to anyone else. However,
No.
he did not identify as someone who had throat cancer. And yes, he went through chemotherapy, radiotherapy, all the grueling solutions that were offered in this modern day. But he also decided he refused to identify as that. And he focused on healing. And the two together, he's now clear. He is now totally clear of
Amazing.
cancer. Now, anyone watching, before you get angry and think
Yeah.
that's utterly ridiculous. Of course, it doesn't cure anything. You can't cure anything with your mindset. Absolutely not. You can give yourself a much better fighting chance if you identify as someone who is well. You identify as someone who is working through something. We've even heard of instances where people have been wrongly diagnosed
Yes.
with a condition and then have gone on to experience all the symptoms of that through it's psychosomatic, where they then experience all the aches, the pains, and then have gone on to become so incredibly ill. And actually, they didn't have the illness at all
Yeah.
because they believed in it, they identified in it. So when you're working with your clients, how do you coach them, if you like, into changing that mindset, into identifying as a different kind of person to help them work through whatever it is they want to walk through, whether it's a physical diagnosis or a trauma or whatever it is?
Yeah, and that's important to acknowledge. This works as well if you've been ill or you've got a diagnosis, as if you're just unhappy in your life, or you want to make changes. The process is literally just the same. So once you've connected in with your past and you've got an awareness of what you're carrying and the impact it's having on the present, and you've released that from you on all these levels of the self, then you can start looking at who you would rather identify as. Because if you haven't connected in with that past, it will be projected into the present and onto the future. It's there alongside you, which is why we often keep repeating the same patterns again. The actual content might be slightly different. You know, you might have a new boyfriend or something, but the same kind of emotional trauma will be repeated one way or another. So what we will do is we'll look to the future. So I'd see it like a timeline. Since I was a young child, I've been able to see down timelines. So that's kind of why I structured it this way in the book. So we look to the future. You know, who do I want to be? How do I want to identify in my future? What does my future self look like? What do they feel like? What are they actually doing in their lives? And so we consciously construct that again on all the different levels of the self. So what would they be doing physically? Where would they be? How would they be looking after their body? What would they be eating? You know, just down to tiny little things like that. Looking at the emotions, how will they be feeling? What kind of thoughts will be going through their mind? What do they believe about themselves, about others, about the world? You know, and then expanding it out. What do they do on a spiritual level? Are they meditating? Are they connecting in with these higher vibrational frequencies? Have they got some kind of daily routine that is reinforcing that future self that they want to be? And then looking at how they connect in with other people. What relationships will they have around them? Who are they identifying with, as well as how, you know, within themselves with other people? And so, you know, you're consciously creating that. And yeah, you could think, okay, well, that's a bit airy fairy, that's all up in the sky. How are you going to get from here to there? So then we bring that back down into the present moment on your timeline. And we do that on all the levels of the self. And we start living today as if you are that future version of you. And so connecting in, because you've got to have action. So connecting in on a daily basis, you know, what 3 things can I do today that are going to take me one step closer to being that future self, you know? And then in the evening, just checking them off, really simple tools, but you have to be living as that person or else you're never going to get there, you know?
So, and I do this, and I'm quite fortunate, I suppose, that I intuitively have done it pretty much my whole life. I didn't really think about it. It's just part of who I am, and I do this. And moments where I've had challenges and difficulties, whether it's, you know, emotional, physical, experiential, whatever, I realize, oh, I've got out of sync. I've
Yes.
actually allowed myself to sink down into, you know, I'm the kind of person who I feel all the feels. So when I feel sad, I feel very sad. And when I feel low, I feel very low. And then I have to realize, no, come on, snap yourself out of this. You're laying in it. And you can't get
Yes.
anywhere if you're laying down. You need to, right, what would my future self be? And I kind of pull myself out of it sort of that way. And again, I'm not saying that's a cure for depression, anxiety, or anything else, but used in conjunction with any help that you may receive, oh my gosh, does it superpower it? It gives it such a huge boost. When you talk about, you know, living the life in the present that you see your future self being, and that used to be, you know, dress for the job that you want, not for the job that you have. It's kind of
Fake it to make it.
yeah, it's kind of a manifestation, or a modern manifestation of that, which is, yeah, I'm going to behave in a way that the future me would behave. And I think there's so much, to me, there's so much to that makes sense, because then you become accustomed to it, so that then when you do eventually achieve the thing that you are aiming for, you feel so comfortable in it and so ready for it that actually it almost feels like it's come to you too easily, but it hasn't. You've actually been working on it step by step by step by step for years beforehand to bring you to this point. If you think that you're suddenly going to be this person when you get there, you're not, because you're bringing all your old stuff with you.
Absolutely.
And you know, as you know, my husband's a coach, and when he speaks to people who maybe want to change their mindset, whether it's around work or whether it's around exercise, but using, say, exercise, for example, oh, I'd love to be able to be the kind of person who goes for a run. No, I don't run, he doesn't run, but just using it as an example. And it's switching that mindset to, no, I'm a runner. I am a runner. I'm the kind of person. Now, your running might be terrible. It might be half running, half walking, hanging onto a lamppost, but it doesn't matter. I'm a runner. I identify as that. And then actually you find that it is something that you're embodying in your present self, rather than, oh yeah, I'd love to be the kind of person that I would go for this, or I would try that. No, identify as it. So what do you say when people push back against this and say, oh yeah, well, I identify as a millionaire, but that's not happening. How if this is something that people want
Yeah.
to see in their lives,
Yeah.
how can they do that without get themselves into any kind of trouble?
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that it is more than faking it to make it, because we've got neuroplasticity. Our brain can literally change. We've got, the biochemistry that shifts when our thoughts shift. And so when we are consciously doing this, we're restructuring who we are. We're not just pretending to be a millionaire, let's say. I mean, that was a tricky one, isn't it? We're not just pretending, oh, I'm going to be a millionaire, so I tell you what, I'm just going to go and buy that boat over there. No, I haven't got the money, but I'll get a loan. No, I don't think so.
Yes.
That's not going to
No.
work. But if you wanted to be a millionaire, then what is it about being a millionaire that's going to get you there? And what steps can you take? There's no reason why, if one person can become a millionaire, that another person can't. They just need to learn for themselves what it is that's going to take them there and what they need to do in order to make that happen on all of those levels of the self. If you don't identify, let's make it a little bit easier. Let's say somebody that wants to be the runner, the fit and healthy runner. If they're not identifying as a runner, if they are identifying as somebody that lies on the sofa and eats donuts for breakfast and doesn't even leave the house, then they're not going to become the person that they're wanting to be. So they need to address what's going on at every single level of the self. And the reason to do that is what I've just explained, is that we're changing the biochemistry in the body. We're changing what the kind of the connections within the brain, so that we literally can become somebody new. If you've, I know you've read the book, so do you remember the part earlier on in the book when I talk about a client of mine that's got dissociative identity disorder?
So
So
interesting.
isn't that interesting? So for your listeners or your viewers, basically a client of mine, dissociative identity disorder is where, it used to be called multiple personality disorder, is where we've got a number of different alters that we can suddenly switch into. So one minute I could be Amanda here, and then the next minute I could be identifying as somebody much younger. And this is sadly what my client had. She'd suffered a lot of trauma, and lots of people that have had trauma can be diagnosed with DID. I'd recommended to her that she have a QEEG scan, which is where they look at the brain patterning. And whilst she was in this scan, she decided to switch to her younger alter. So from being herself with her own diagnoses that could be seen on the scan, her own traumas, her attachment issues, etc., she then switched to this younger version of herself. And in doing so, her scan immediately switched with it. So instead of it being her older brain, it was a young, less developed brain that had different issues, shall we say, different medical problems, mental health problems that could be seen on this scan that weren't there before. I mean, I've got the scans. It's amazing to see completely different. One area would be yellow, now it's blue. There's no reason for that. She was literally a completely different person in accordance to her brain scan. And then when I looked at the research, there's so much research about people with DID that when they've switched personalities, identities, they might have an allergic reactions to things that they didn't have before. They might have completely different handwriting. They might, honestly, there's some that have been blind, deaf. There's certain situations that just switch. So it's not the body that's telling us who we are. There's something else going on. And then when we're switching our identities, we literally can become somebody new.
It's just incredible. It is just incredible. And, if you think about it, going back to the sort of exercise point of view, because I suppose it's the one that's more, it's more easily relatable. For example, if I'm doing any exercise and I'm like, oh, really not feeling it today, really not feeling, we all have those days. And then I tell myself, no, I'm strong. And sometimes I whisper it to myself like a crazy person. And I literally whisper to myself, I am strong. I am strong. And the difference it makes, literally, I can feel almost like a surge of energy. I am strong. And it's in the same way, obviously, when I'm helping people and coaching them through if they're going to do like a public speaking thing or something like that, even just telling yourself, I'm calm, I am calm, I am confident, I'm in control. And you're reminding yourself that, yeah, of course you can't control everything that's going on in the whole world, but I'm in control of my breath. I'm in control of how I'm standing. I'm in control of where my thoughts are flying to. I'm bringing them back. It shifts something inside of us, because so often, you know, our, our brain is, it's off. It's looking at all the things and it's trying to work it out in a way so that we can best get through whatever challenging situation that we find ourselves in. And something when we're so all over the place in terms of our our fears, our anxieties, and everything else, our brain is trying to latch on to, what is it that you want? What part of this can I help you with? Is it a past trauma that's coming up that you're thinking is, reoccurring? Are you projecting into the future that everyone is going to laugh at you and you're going to make a real fool of yourself? What is it? And I think, for me anyway, if you can bring yourself back to the absolute present of, what am I right now? Right now, I am in control. I am calm. I am strong. Whichever.
Yeah.
Something shifts and you calm down. And for me, I like to think your brain is, it's running around trying to help. It's like something it's like Tom Cruise in Minority Report. It's going, no, she doesn't want that. No, she doesn't want that. What is it that she wants? And
That's
he goes,
nice.
okay, no, it's all good. She just wants to feel calm and in control. We've got this.
Yeah.
Look, here's all the evidence. Here's all the evidence that you've done this kind of thing before in a different scenario. You can calm down, and your heart rate stills, your breathing regulates, you feel more present. And I know from my experience, when I'm live television, broadcasting, and there's amazingly complex things that are happening super fast, and you need to react very quickly whilst also looking calm. For me, it went to a whole different thing where time actually slowed, and I would get an instruction and it was as if I had an extra minute. Time slowed down, and I had the ability to, almost like the Minority Report thing, to think, going back in my mind, right, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. That's going to work. Right. Pull that out. Where can I go with this? And it's happened in a split second in terms of everyone else. But I think that's because I was so used to being utterly present with what I was doing. So when a challenge came up, I didn't panic, because I can't panic. There's millions of people watching, so I don't have the luxury of panicking. But because I did it over and over and over again for so long, and I've heard racing drivers say the same thing when they're coming up to a really, Formula One drivers coming up to a corner and time slows, and for them, they have all the time in the world to think about what their reaction is going to be. Think about it. If you hear of people who've been in car accidents and this kind of thing, saying, I don't understand, it all seemed to happen so slowly. And this is what our brain does when it's trying to take on board something that is incredibly challenging. It's trying to work it all out to give you the best possible outcome. And if you can work together with your body, mind, spirit, brain, whatever, think how powerful you'll be. Amazing things could happen.
Absolutely. That's so true. I love that. I love how you had that conscious awareness, and it sounds almost like you became the observer. So you were able to, look through. And that's partly one of the things that kind of I teach people to do, rather than being stuck in the thinking mind. We kind of, we go out into the energy body and into this kind of observing mind, so that we can consciously construct from that place, rather than, when we're stuck within the body. But you said something really interesting there, because when I was, it was a suspected stroke. I choose to believe it was a suspected stroke as well. By the time I left hospital, so I was in there for about a week, the MRI scan basically showed no evidence. But when I went in, I was graded as number 7 on the stroke scale, which meant long-term acute inpatient rehabilitation. And they said it would be between 6 to 8 months. And it's kind of like 6 to 8 weeks, really, that I've managed to do that by consciously going through all of those different levels of the self. And it's not just, so you're saying, oh, I'm strong. So it's absolutely, I found that myself, through exercise, but very much trying to, so I couldn't even pick up a knife to feed myself. I literally had no grip. And, my brain would be wanting to say, I'm strong, I can grip, but my body just did not want to play ball, And there's lots of research that shows visualizations can actually, they look at the MRI scans when somebody actually, that's people that have had stroke. I write about this in the book, and then I go and have to do it for myself, afterwards. But that's what I was doing when I was 21 with my tumor. I was visualizing it. I was seeing my immune system attacking, like chipping away at this tumor that I actually believe I created as a response to being scared of all of the paranormal situation. And I think by connecting back in on an energetic level, I managed to release that as well. But by looking at the MRI scans, they can't actually see the difference often between people that have rehabilitated physically and just done it through visualizations alone. So as well as telling yourself in your mind, I'm strong, you're actually changing what's going on within the brain. You're changing the biochemistry that you're producing. So it's so much deeper than just saying I'm strong or I'm healed or, anything like that. So our words are really important because they are attached on all those other levels of the self as well. So that's, it's something we generally all do, but we don't know the actual impact. And we can easily dismiss it as, oh, well, that's just wishful thinking. But actually it's much, much more.
But also, if you keep telling yourself, I'm so stupid, or I'm so clumsy, oh, I'm worthless, your brain is listening to all this and going, oh, right, okay, because I'm stupid, clumsy, and worthless. And all of that is feeding into you until you become what you repeatedly say you are. So, and again, we do it without even thinking, using these words like I'm stupid and worthless and clumsy or what have you.
Yeah.
And again, if I could urge anybody watching this, if you find yourself doing, oh, I'm just so clumsy. No, you're not. Sometimes you drop something. Everybody drops something.
Yeah.
Flick it around and be really careful with the words that you use with yourself, because your brain and your body is listening.
Yeah.
I want, before we wrap, you touched on there that you feel that you got a tumor in your pituitary gland because of you were afraid and trying to block out the psychic side of yourself. And it's interesting that it was that gland that you got the tumor on.
Yeah,
Would you say?
absolutely. Yeah, because the pituitary and the pineal gland are connected. And historically, it's been said that it's through the pineal gland, through the pituitary, that we actually do connect in with those kind of higher vibrational frequencies through to, our intuition, through to more spiritual dimensions, shall we say. So, yeah, I do believe it was a physical manifestation. And I've got so much evidence within my own life and the lives of clients, even my ex-husband, how things manifest physically when we're not wanting to face them either emotionally or mentally. Our body speaks our truth, and it will eventually come out in one way or another. So, and that's what I was talking about before. If we listen to our inner tuition, if we listen to what's being spoken and address it, that's when we can truly heal. I honestly see it time and time again. These things come for a reason. Not just like, oh, there's some reason. They've come to teach us, and we've got to learn and listen. Otherwise, we're just going to have to keep repeating it until we learn.
Now you've done a full 180 in terms of going from being afraid of and pushing down the psychic side of you to an extent that you feel that you got a tumor that you ended up healing yourself from. Obviously, working in a very much throughout your career in science-based and fact-based world, and you've come full circle, and now your title is the Psychic Psychologist. How are you showing that side of yourself now?
It took a long time, as you say. I literally thought I was coming out and committing professional suicide, actually owning that. But yeah, so now I'm fully embracing it. The book's out there. I very much want people to be able to get access to these teachings, to this awareness, because like we were saying earlier, you have to know something on an intellectual level before you can bring it into reality. And so, this is the first step to doing that. And I also wanted people that, can't afford to come and see a psychologist to have access to some of the teachings. So it's very much like I'm walking alongside you throughout the book to help you on your journey. So the book's the first part, and I work with clients online, in person. I'll be doing some retreats, speaking events, workshops, that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm very much about getting the word out there really right now.
And just one final question. What's the difference between your regular psychologist and a psychic psychologist?
Well, do you know what? In all honesty, I don't think there's probably that much difference. I think the difference mainly is that the psychic psychologist is very consciously aware and choosing to bring the unconscious into the conscious of the client. So I'm kind of, so I was doing this and I didn't realize it. You know, I'd be working with clients and I'd get information intuitively and I didn't think I could use it. Whereas now as the psychic psychologist, I feel free and able to, you know, to help my clients listen to their inner intuition, you know, interpret what's going on for them. And I'm not telling them, I'm presenting it for them to then, you know, choose to take that on board or not themselves. So, you know, a general psychologist would probably be, you know, looking at your thoughts, feelings and behaviors like I was talking about earlier, but they will have access if they are working, if we are in close proximity with another human being and we are having an empathic connection to them, we will be connecting on every level and getting this information. If we are fully connected with ourselves, like I said, we can connect in with another person. And so, you know, that's the difference here. Once you've worked on yourself, then you can access all of this information from another person. I call it telepathy. When you get telepathic and empathic information from people when you're in that relationship with them.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me today. The book, here it is. It is out now. I'm going to put the link in the notes so that everyone can rush off and buy it. I heartily recommend it. It is it's so fascinating, really fascinating. And what's so brilliant is we are all selfish beings. And really, you're reading it thinking all about yourself, thinking, oh my gosh, that's me, or how does that resonate with me? So it's brilliant. It's a totally self-indulgent experience, whilst you're also learning as well. So thank you, Amanda. Thank you for joining us today.
You're most welcome. Thank you, Andrea.
I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation. Remember to like and subscribe to this channel so you never miss a single one.